the announcement of the inflation rate for November, we are seeing here that over 24 million Nigerians have been pushed to the poverty rate. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies, where we'll be looking at some of the stories that are trending on the papers this morning. I am Sela Elashidasham. I have done the program with Rachel Tansey. Good morning.
Good morning, Sela.
All right, and to our viewers, do well to join us live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can drop your comment, your views on any of the story we'll be looking at this morning. And Rachel will take us through the first paper, which is the Guardian newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, national statistics, population outgrows economy amid rising dependence and misery. You can find details on page 6. And there is some information concerning this where we can see path to future growth, where we are seeing traditional contraceptives among females in relationships. We're seeing 3.6%. Then we have modern contraceptives among female in relationship, 18.4%. Zero contraceptive among females in relationship, we have 78%. Dependence to active population ratio, we have 64 to 36. Population under 14 years, we have 91 million. And then we also have a nutrition burden where children under 5 without access to eggs is equals to 9 out of 10. That is just 1 out of that 10 gets access to eggs. Children under 5 without access to milk, we have 9 out of 10. Children under 5 without access to meat, we have 6 out of 10. So only 4 children get access to meat. That is, we have children lacking daily in their protein needs. And then we also have Nigeria in numbers. As of 2012, we're 167 million. So we have a 30% growth in 10 years. As of 2022, we are 216.78 million. Then we have a UN projection for 2050 to be 400 million. Debt service to revenue rate 101.5%. Stock of CBN overdraft to federal government, we have 26 trillion naira. That is 11% of 2023 projected GDP. And then you can find details of all of this information and statistics on page 6. Still on the Guardian, we have police neutralized 13 kidnappers, rescue 263 victims in Katsina State. You can find details on page 9. Tinubu sacks heads of aviation agencies. FEC approved 6.32 billion naira contract. Fubara bears fangs demolishes assembly complex, presents 2024 budget to 4 lawmakers. You can find details on page 6. Unions hail federal government exemption of universities and police orders from IPPIS. Sanwo-Olu presents 2.2 trillion naira 2024 budget to Assembly. This is in Lagos State. You can find details on page 15. No going back on concession of international airports, Kenyamu insists. 3 fair dead in Ekiti Bank robbery. You can find details on page 2. And that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty, we have inflation pushes 24 million Nigerians into poverty. This is coming from the World Bank, but insists petrol should sell 750 naira per liter. Sluggish growth and rising inflation in Africa's biggest economy have pushed an additional 24 million Nigerians into poverty within 5 years, according to the World Bank. And you can have a closer look at people going over there to beg. And Rachel, I can't help but link it to the population, talking about our population, our growth, our economy, and meet the rising dependent and misery, which we saw on the Guardian newspaper. And you and I will agree that, of course, looking at what we are generating, it will definitely not go around to take care of Nigerians presently. If we're having that presently because of what is happening, the inflation rate, because today is the day that we're supposed to get the inflation for November. And then as we await that, we're already seeing before that, or already, I'm sure it's already there, it's just for the papers to get access to it. We're seeing that about 24 million Nigerians have been pushed. And then I just don't want to understand, or I just don't want to, I'm trying to live in denial right now of how many more people will be pushed by the end of December next year if Nigeria does not do something to make sure that we control all of this. And now I'm wondering if it has made it to the papers that are talking about our population.
Yes, sir.
What is the government doing to make sure that we are able to help Nigerians? That is, in fact, the implication of this is that control birth. That means the number of Nigerians that should be born should be reduced. But then how do you get to speak to people living in the rural areas, people who do not know about this? Because we've heard over the years family planning, control births, and all of these things, pills, what to do, what not to do, and all of that. And I remember where we also saw that some of these contraceptives actually even affect, especially the female gender, because of some uterine cancer that you might actually get. So a lot of questions on what is the government hoping to do to make sure that what we're able to control this. Even though another school of thought can say, I mean, then what do you say about countries like China? I mean, we cannot compare that, because if you look at, they are quite developed, and they'll be able to take care of their population.
Numbers, yeah.
But regardless of their number, they're able to take care of everybody that is there. But what is the Nigerian government doing? Here we're saying that, let's even look at the daily needs every day. We're seeing how many kids are unable to even have access to protein. Then how are we going to now look at other basic need that children need? And then let's go down to right now petrol. How much is a liter? Let's look at even naira in relation to dollar. Quite a number of factors you can actually look at in relation to this. So I don't know what Nigerian government is doing. But then, just like a lot of civil societies have come out to say, when you take a look at our budget, you will know that it's just to actually finance some of, or actually to look into some of the need of our politicians, and not because they want to take care of the masses. So I'm hoping that the government will have a rethink, because already we are seeing various governors submitting the budget they have. In Lagos is having about 2.2 trillion naira. Rivers yesterday presented, I think, over 800 billion naira or that. So we'll be seeing more governors submitting their budget before the end of the year. But beyond that, what are they going to do to make sure that, you know what, let us capture Nigerians in our budget? But
You know, Stella, when you look at our population, it is large because we are the populace in Africa, and we are among the top in the world. We are big. And if we do not curtail it, I mean, we are running into a situation where our population is not even that outrageously much for the government to say our economy can. Because what you're supposed to do is let your economy outgrow your population. We have economies that are big, and their also population is bigger than ours. However, their economy outgrew their population. And in the case of countries like China, we can say that they also had to control it. They went down to 2, then finally to 1. That was how they controlled it. If not, they would be more than what they are now. However, we also see an economy that outgrew its population. And is our number worrisome? It is, because we can't say over 2 million. We're looking at almost 270 million. We're looking at clocking 300. We haven't done our census yet, so we do not know the numbers for sure. But we are a huge population. We are much. And I believe it's the lack of work towards economic growth that made our population to outgrow the economy. Because when you look at Nigerian economy as it is now, we are in the position to have been better
than we are presently.
So it just shows that we stopped doing certain things, and that is why we grew to the position where our population is outgrowing our economy. But as long as, because one of the edge certain countries like China have is the manpower that we do have. But how are they able to still have? Because now they have industries to employ those workforce. We have the workforce, but we don't have industry to employ that workforce. So when you look at it, we have every resources and we are wasting it. We're not doing something about it. If not, we should be able in a position where our population shouldn't outgrow our economy. But then we just hope that we have a government that will do something like this and eventually take controlling our population seriously, because it is very important. It's something that is being embraced globally. I know it will not sit well with us on a lot of level. Why? Because of our religious nature. But when your resources are beginning to not be sufficient for your population, it's also a danger on its own. It's also a problem. So let's grow our economy and let's control certain things that we can. And I believe that, I mean, a lot of people, it won't sit well or with them and all of that.
It better sit well with them. You don't need an oracle, or you don't need a special or spiritual being to tell you that, you know what, right now the economy is very hard.
It's
You need to
hard.
cut down on your birth control and
And
all of
all of
that.
that, yes.
Well, let's look at other stories. Still on the Voice of Liberty, $6 billion hydropower project. EFCC declares ex-power minister wanted. You can find more detail in the paper. Federal government exempt universities, polytechnics, and others from the IPPIS. Remember the back and forth the university had concerning this payroll, and we're seeing that finally they are exempted so they can go back to their own indigenous that. And I think maybe they took out advice, Rachel, concerning that because we say let us, let's patronize ours because the initial one, UTAS, was what the universities were using, and that was what they created for themselves.
Yeah.
The IPPIS was something I think we saw we're spending about 4,000
$44 for
$44.
every account
Yeah,
to be maintained.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm happy. Possibly the government is beginning to see that, you know what, let's utilize what we have here in the country. Still on the Voice of Liberty, justify huge allocation to you with improved security. Senator Lawan to the Defense Ministry. Detail can be found in the paper. And the issues of Rivers crisis. Wike is a brilliant political strategist, but you want to know what the but is, you can do well to grab the paper and see more. Tinubu at risk of losing re-election in 2027 poll. This is coming from the ex-PGF DG Lukman. And on Tinubu's government nightmare for Ijo, Isari Tokumbo is saying, you can find more of that story in the paper. UK warned its citizens against traveling to Kano, Rivers, Kaduna, and 21 other states. This is not the first time we're seeing this international bodies warning concerning various states in Nigeria. We hope that we'll do something so that our country will not be tagged as one of the danger zones for people to visit. And that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On Nigerian Tribune, Sanwo-Olu presents 2.2 trillion naira budget of renewal. FEC exempts tertiary institutions from IPPIS. OK 6 billion naira contract awards under aviation. Tinubu swears in new ICPC PCSC chairman. Removes FAN and NAMA buses. You can find more details on page 5. The big story on the paper: in Rivers, legal issues arise as government demolishes assembly complex. Sitting venue quorum on front burner as 4 members witness Fubara deliver budget proposal in government house. Speaker declares seats of 27 lawmakers vacant. PDP writes INEC demands fresh election into vacant assembly seats. Why we demolished assembly complex. This is coming from the Rivers government. You can find details on page 10. INEC's failure to prosecute electoral offenders worrisome, coming from the NBA. ECOWAS Parliament gives condition to Niger military junta. You can find details on page 25. Ekiti governor appoints 162 new aides. 3 feared dead as armed robbers attack banks in Ekiti state. Ondo Assembly declares Aidatiwa acting governor. NLC rejects proposed plan to restructure TCN, says it portends great danger. You can find details on page 5. And then we have a picture story showing the demolition of the Rivers State House complex, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Vanguard newspaper, CBN blames scarcity of banknotes on hoarding. You can find detail on page 19. And on the 2024 budget, Lagos, Borno, Rivers proposed 3.387 trillion naira budget. And on the error bumping, survivors drag federal government to court, seek 33 billion naira compensation. You can find more on page 13. Ohanizi IPOB begs Tinubu to free Kanu. You can find more of that also in the paper. Poor Nigerians hit 104 million. This is coming from the World Bank. Asks NNPC to publish account and revenue flow. NNPC earning under scrutiny. This is coming from Edu. ICE Nigerians holding large forex in domestic accounts. And then we have Industry Minister counters World Bank on power subsidy. You can find more of that on page 7. And on Rivers crisis, state government demolishes assembly complex, which happened yesterday morning, and they said it's as a result of the burning, and then it was unsafe for lawmakers to hold their plenary there, and so that was why they actually demolished that, so they have a different space for the lawmakers to be having their different meetings. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, Tinubu sack FAN, NAMA, NSIB, NIMET DG suspend NCAA DG, remove the C. The NCAT rector, more detail can be found on page 8. We have other columns for Olufasan and another for sports. And then you can do well, grab the paper, and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Blueprint newspaper, JITAS as World Health Organization confirms 25 new COVID-19 cases in Nigeria, and it's that season for you to take your Newsmax seriously. Mother 9-day-old baby killed in Ondo building collapse. Still on Rivers crisis, state government will rebuild assembly complex, coming from commissioner. Tinubu sacks FAA and NIMED NCAT other bosses, announces replacement. The big story on the paper, Tinubu's economic reforms making positive impact, but coming from the World Bank, says unsustainable spending on subsidies fueled economic imbalance. You can find details on page 6. At last, federal government removes tertiary institutions from IPPIS. CBN assures public of adequate cash supply. CJN to judges always consult laws, rules before writing judgment. And at the downside of the paper, will end insurgency, terrorism simultaneously, minister reassures. CAS 84 urges federal government to recruit, motivate security personnel. You can find details on page 6, and that's all news on Blueprint newspaper.
On this day newspaper, some will present 2.246 trillion naira 2024 appropriation bill to Lagos Assembly. Economic protection takes priority, and then capital expenditure to go up 1.224 trillion naira. House promises to monitor implementation. You can follow up that story closely on the front page, and you can continue on page 12. Climate change, nearly 200 countries agree historic deal to reduce forex fuel consumption. You can find more of that on page 5. With 4 soldiers killed, 2 Koreans kidnapped, security concern mounts in Rivers. With the right of following, the story says oil production may be impacted if crisis persists. And then Aniko Briggs, one situation may engulf Nigeria and the president. You can continue to read more of that story on page 12. Fubara Ascent Control in Rivers present the 2024 budget to 4-member assembly. Demolishes bomb legislative complex for reconstruction. Federal government denies involvement in the state political crisis. 27 defectors lawmakers ousted by legislature. And Falana is saying INEC required to conduct a fresh election still in Rivers State. We have a picture story here at the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in Atlanta. You can look closely at the story and read more. Tinubu approves leadership changes in aviation and aerospace development parastatals. You can find detail on page 32, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, COP28 nations strike deal to end consumption of fossil fuels. You can find details on page 27. And on Rivers crisis, Fubara draws battle lines, demolishes assembly complex, moves against defecting lawmakers. 4 loyal lawmakers expel colleagues as governor presents 2024 appropriation bill to assembly. Count us out of crisis, a statement from the federal government. Many fear killed in Ekiti robbery. Sanwo-Olu presents 2.2 trillion naira 2024 budget to assembly. Borno's Governor Zulum plans to spend 340.5 billion naira in 2024. We will deliver affordable housing to low middle income earners, a statement coming from Imba, and we are looking forward to that development in the country. You can find more details on page 29. Tinubu approves sack suspension and replacement of aviation chiefs. NNPCL generates 4.5 trillion naira revenue for government in 10 months. You can find details on page 26. U.S. lawmakers urges Supreme Court to release Kanu unconditionally. The writer under the story, proof you are not pursuing ethnic cleansing, IPOP tells Tinubu. You can find details on page 29. We are waiting for President's approval to concession 5 airport statement coming from Kenyamu. You can find details on page 2. At the downside of the paper, federal government removes varsity and police College of Education from IPPIS. You can find details on page 28. We have a picture story showing Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State presenting 2024 budget estimate to the State Assembly in Ikeja yesterday, and that's all the news on Dailies on newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Obasanjo offers to testify against Agunloye in $2.3 billion Mambila arbitration as EFCC declares ex-power minister wanted. You can find details in the paper. And the big story, Governor Fubara goes for broke, tackles 27 pro-Wike lawmakers, orders demolition of assembly complex in early morning operation, as Speaker declares defector lawmaker seat vacant, why we demolish the assembly complex coming from the Rivers government. Fubara congratulates Wike at the 56th amid Rivers crisis. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Finally, Ondo Assembly declares Ayeda Tiwa acting governor of Ondo State. You can find more detail of the story in the paper. And on cash scarcity, 3.4 trillion naira in circulation, CBN insists. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Federal government exempt varsity polytechnics and others from the IPPIS. More detail in the paper. Sanwo-Olu presents 2.2 trillion naira budget of renewal. And we have federal government has no hand in Rivers crisis. This is coming from the minister. Governor Fubara presents 2024 budget to the 5-member Rivers State. We can see the picture story showing him presenting it. APC may be kicked out of power in 2027, former National Vice Chair warns. And downside of the paper, intervene in Rivers crisis. APC Chief Tal urges Tinubu. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, petrol should be 750 naira per litre without subsidy coming from World Bank. Lagos budget 151.66 billion naira for health in 2024, 1.5% higher than 2023. Find details on page 11. Hurricane Tinubu rocks aviation ministry. We have Najomo takes over at NCAA. Fresh CEOs appointed for FAN, NAMA, NSIB, and others. You can find details on page 2. The big story on the paper, Nigeria's economy. World Bank profile way forward. Urges federal government to increase VAT rate to boost non-oil revenue. Reiterates need for CBN to tighten monetary policy. Calls for more transparency from NNPCL. You can find details on page 2. Federal government labor heading for showdown over planned restructuring of TCN. In Ondo State Assembly declares Ayeda Tiwa acting governor, and I'll say it is about time we saw the inconsistency in the government, and then the State House of Assembly was not ready to do the needful, and it was becoming disturbing and then a thing of concern, because why would you have a governor that has been sick for months, absent, and then you wouldn't let the vice to take the deputy governor, rather to take in to sit in that position and let the business of the day go on in the state. However, we are seeing that finally it shouldn't have taken this long, because once the governor wasn't going to be around for a long while, you could see how everyday politics keep playing with governance in Nigeria. There is an amount of time when you are leaving. We saw that even at the federal government level, when Tinubu was going on a medical treatment, we saw how the vice president became the acting president at the period of time. That's how democracy should play. When you are not going to be available, you have been sick, you've been out for months. It's almost like Ondo didn't have a governor on seat, and we saw that the moves for Ayeda Tiwa to be acting governor was frustrated, making it look like it was a crime against governance, and it wasn't. But I'm just thankful that they finally did the needful, and that governance is still top priority over politics in Nigeria. You can find details on page 8. Why we demolished Rivers State House of Assembly, details also on page 8. And at the downside of the paper, ASU wins as FEC removes universities, poly colleges of education from IPPIS. We have NAS rejects poor judiciary budget, gives minister 24 hours to make appearance, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
All right, before we move further with other paper analysis, we'd love to take a break at this moment. Quite a lot of stories to talk about, looking at our population, looking at the inflation rate affecting Nigerians, where we're seeing over 24 million Nigerians have been pushed through the poverty, rate. So you could actually talk about that. We also have the issue of River State, back and forth on those states. We've seen that finally the deputy have taken over as the acting governor, even though we know that the governor came in and he was sick again, and so he had to leave again for Germany. So you can do well to talk about any of this thing when we come back from the break. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies. We've been looking at a number of stories that are making it on the front page, where we've seen the governors are dropping their 2024 budget. We've seen that of Lagos, Rivers, Borno, and other governors are still dropping the budget for 2024. And we have quite a number of stories that we've talked about on the paper. We'd love to hear what your own views are concerning the story. You can call us on the number that is displayed on your screen at this moment, but please do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set, because we would love to hear what your own contributions are concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. I still have Rachel Tanzi with me in the studio. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Nation newspaper. Firms to lose tariff waivers on imported items. You can find detail of that story in the paper. Ondo Assembly, Oke's Lucky Ayedetiwa, acting governor. You can find detail of that also on page 4. And still on the paper, we are having 3 killed, 2 banks robbed in Akere Ekiti. And then we have Tinubu fires head of FAN and Nama Nimet NCAT. You can find detail of the story in the paper. Varsities, Polytechnics, College of Education released from IPPIS, which is good news for them. You can find detail of that on page 16. And coming from Edu, the Minister of Finance, government plans audit for NNPCL, where we're having 650 naira petrol price not cost reflective, says the World Bank chief, where they're saying that with the removal of the fuel subsidy, we're supposed to be having petrol at 750 naira per liter. Cardoso says that poor Naira redesign policy, cost of cash scarcity. You can find more of the story in the paper. Assembly complex demolition seek Rivers deeply into crisis. We can find more detail of that story in the paper. And also we have the writer following that story says we can't be cowed by 27 House members. Fubara present the budget to 4 lawmakers at the government house, and we have seen a display of mockery of democracy and mindless destruction of everything democracy by the same people who should be defining it. And we are having a column, it's a caption, and you can check inside the paper for more detail of that story. Construction of new port, dredging of old ones coming, says Oyetola. You can find more detail of that story in the paper, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Tinubu sacks 5 aviation agencies head suspends NCAA boss. ASU hails federal government as FEC removes varsities and others from IPPIS. Gunmen kill woman, abduct 7 on Lagos Ibadan Expressway. The big story on the paper, Rivers demolishes assembly, pro-Fubara speaker declares defective seats vacant. Government justifies assembly demolition, says complex not suitable for legislative business. PDP directs legal advisor to sue defectors. Governor Fubara afraid of his shadow, says APC. NNPCL not transparent on subsidy and dollar revenues coming from the World Bank. And on Kaduna bombing, military raises 8-man panel, villagers disown 33 billion naira suit. NLC rejects TCN privatization, demands policy reversal. You can find details on page 13. We have pictures to showing the demolition of the Rivers State House Assembly, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Independent, we have Rivers Speaker declares seat of the 25 defected lawmakers vacant. Why we demolish the Rivers Assembly complex, coming from the state government. Fubara present 800 billion naira budget for the 2024 fiscal year to the Assembly. Crude oil production price benchmark for 2024 budget realistic, coming from the NNPC. Pledges to maintain level of dividend projected to the MTEF. You can find detail of that story in the paper. The big story for Daily Independent. It's time Nigeria moved from reforms to results, coming from the World Bank. Say it must ensure coordinated fiscal and monetary policy actions. Not made progress, life is difficult. APC chief tells leaders alert on rebellion against party in 2027. You can find detail on page 29 rather. Federal government assure aircraft licensing companies guarantee of asset. And then we're having Lagos State Governor Sanwo-Olu present 2.246 trillion naira budget to the Lagos Assembly. It should improve lives of Lagos residents, Obasa tells the governor. Don't tarnish image of judiciary. The Chief Justice of Nigeria wants Federal High Court justice. You can find more detail of that story on page 6. CBN assures on addressing naira scarcity. You can find that also on page 7. Labour kick against planned restructuring of the TCN. And then we have ASU upbid as fake OK's exit of varsities polytechnics from IPPIS. Tinubu sack Fan, Nema and other MDs announces replacement. Downside of the paper, PDP comments plan to declare 25 Rivers Assembly seats vacant. You can find more detail of that story on page 6, and that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
Speaker declares 27 seats vacant, receives 2024 budget.
All right, let's take this call. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Sharon.
Yes, we have beautiful programs and papers. And our government will continue to pray to God for them to be focused and diligent with their discharge. Honestly speaking, they are having beautiful budgets by the state governors that they are presenting. They got given the will to really work on those budgets so that those budgets supposed to reach, so that they will feel the impact of governance in Jesus' name. What play out in Rivers State is a shameful thing to Nigeria. I do not understand that a policy maker will just leave party and go to another party, not considering constitution or having the constitution act. Now they are back. The seat has been declared vacant, and the governor presented his budget to 4 or 5 lawmakers in the house. What a ridicule to a state. Were they elected by the past governor, or were they elected by the people that they're supposed to serve? I don't know where we are going in this country. I pray that we'll take it right the time. We are still practicing democracy. Democracy of the truth is not right in Nigeria. What is playing out in Nigeria is the other way. Look at what happened since 1999 to that. Nigerians cannot realize where they are going to. The era of military, I'm telling you, Nigeria was better than what we are experiencing today. We had experienced military era at that time. But since democracy came on board, these people continually carrying our resources to themselves, embezzling the resources that are supposed to be meant for all Nigerians. And things are not getting right. Is that how we continue? As a practicing democratic country, I pray that we'll get it right with time. We'll continue to be the head of Africa, debating to show. Is that the policy? We have beautiful policies on ground. Look at Tinubu promised 35,000 government workers. They just said they were compelled to pay that of September. But up till now, nobody know what the plan for this. That's how we continue this country. They only have issues for themselves to satisfy their needs, but they don't care about the wants of others.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shamal.
Our leaders to work according to will of.
All right. Thank you,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Shamal.
I don't have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day too. Still on Nigerian News Direct, Oyo State flags off disbursement of 1 billion naira SAFA loan to farmers. Tertiary institution get fake note for financial recruitment autonomy. Budget of renewal, Sanwo-Olu earmarks 199 billion naira for education technology sector. The big story on the paper, import restrictions, Nigeria lost over $300 million to tax evasion coming from the World Bank. You can find details on page 3. Recommends reduction of import tariffs to reduce cost of doing business, poverty level. Applauds fiscal reforms, predicts decline in inflation by the first half of 2024. We are waiting to see what World Bank prediction will look like come 2024. And that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On New Telegraph newspaper, talking about World Bank, Nigeria avoided fiscal cliff with bold reforms, economy to grow by 3.5% in 3 years. More detail of that can be found in the paper. CBN blames scarcity on Naira redesign. More detail of that story can be found on page 7. And also, we are having Tinubu sack 5 in aviation, aerospace, development sector, new CEOs. Assembly confirmed Ayeda Tiwa, acting governor of Ondo State. EFCC declares the ex-power minister Aguloye wanted. NNPC Limited remade 4.5 trillion naira revenue in 10 months. You can find more on page 7 and page 28. Lingering crisis, Rivers government demolishes State Assembly complex, justifies action. Fubara present 800 billion naira budget to 4 lawmakers in the government house as Speaker declares the 27 defected lawmaker seat vacant to return to PDP. The CAM members should vacate the seat. This is coming from SAN. We have no hand in the crisis. This is coming from the federal government. You can find more details. So that is the side of the 27 that defected to return back to their home, which is the PDP. And we're having 25 seats vacant then. And on Kaduna, bumping his own 33 billion naira suit, government should declare state of emergency on insecurity. This is coming from Shetu. Fuel still being smuggled across Nigerian borders, says the Navy. Federal government inaugurates council on privatization, says food shortage increased malnutrition. You can find more of that on page 7 and 31, and I believe the government know what to do about food shortage. And then fake exit varsities and other higher institutions from IPPIS. OK's 2.2 billion naira for Port Harcourt Airport. You can find more of that on page 3. Restructuring CN will cause multidimensional disaster coming from the NLC. And downside, we have a study that linked tobacco smoke exposure linked to TB risks. Tobacco smoke exposure linked to TB risks. So for those who are fond of taking tobacco, now you know what the risks are. You can read more of that study on page 28. We have the picture story where you can see the Lagos State Governor Sanwo-Olu presenting the 2.246 trillion naira 2024 budget of renewal to Lagos Assembly, and that's all a New Telegraph newspaper.
On Punch Sports Extra Memory Lane, where we can see pictures of Nigeria's CAF Award winners in past years. You can find details on page 2. We have a countdown day 30. This is to Africa Cup of Nations. Eagles need Musa's leadership at AFCON. You can find details on page 6. My CAF award will boost Eagles. A statement coming from Osimhen. You can find details on page 6. Osimhen's agent to meet Napoli over new deal. FIFA Best Coach Award, Pep battles Paletti. You can find details on page 7. We have Laportiga tipped to replace Ten Hag. Maguire short doubtful for Liverpool clash. You can find details on page 4. The big story on the paper, revival. Nigerian star players hit top form ahead of AFCON. We hope to see that playing out when we are finally in the African Cup of Nations. We have on cricket, Nigeria battle Uganda for semi-final spot. You can find details on page 5. And then we have Kyrgios set to quit tennis. More details on page 8. And we have pictures. We have pictures from in Europa fixtures and clubs who will be facing each other. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Well, we hope that the Super Eagles will get the needed support that they need, Rachel. I think was it yesterday or so. We had one of our callers that was complaining about our women doing better than our men, and something must be wrong somewhere, because I wonder why they do better when they are playing for their personal clubs and all of that, but then the moment they are back home as a team, you wonder what really is going on. So I just hope that, because this is basically one of the things that make Nigerians smile in the midst of this hardship. So we are hoping that Eagles do their best, represent Nigeria well eventually in the AFCON. Let's take a look at another story here, which is the Daily Times newspaper. Another Daily Times newspaper, we see Presidential Committee moved to address aviation charges and complexity. You can find more of that story inside the paper. And on Rivers crisis, we are also having militant group and other stories. We also have a picture story on the front page, and that's all on the Daily Times newspaper.
The newspaper, APC losing war against poverty. 14 million Nigerians became poor in 2023, report from the World Bank. We are on track to stabilize economy, says Edo. Nigeria closer to 2024 financial inclusion target, but gaps persist. Federal government in talks with multinationals to curb exits. Sanwo-Olu proposed 2.2 trillion naira budget for 2024. Corporate leaders make case for more female leadership. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper, and that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
Well, Richard, I hope that they'll listen to our corporate leaders and give more female leadership, because we're beginning to look at some of those places and then it seems as if the men are not doing well. Maybe I'm being biased here, but then regardless of that, I just hope there'll be a balance in leadership position, regardless of your gender. It should be based on if you're competent enough, what you're able to deliver. Because believe you me, when the women are being given, we've seen them over the years. We've seen Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala making it to the Fork paper, so you could tell that a lot of things are happening. So I'm just hoping that our female leaders will be given the position to actually represent us in whatever position it is eventually. But Rachel, I think that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you for doing this with me. Thank you to Mr. Shama from Kaduna for calling us. Thank you to all our viewers and supporters also for always keeping a date with us on the program. Until we come tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.